Oh boy. Alright. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Connor, and today we are back at it with another episode of Connor Talks Games. Now, I did a little thinking this time around. I talk about games a lot, but don't only just, play the video games. Don't get me wrong, I like my Dark Tides, like my Lords of the Fallen, like my Star Rail, like my Zenless Zone Zero, like my Halo, like all of that. But, you know what I also like? I like a nice tabletop game. Something to roll some dice, actually. And I have my dice, with me today. One of my favorite sets. If you watched the previous episode, I mentioned it very briefly, but these are my Beholder Eyes dice set, and I very much like them. But you might be asking, like, well, why are we talking about this? Well, figured, why don't we just take a little episode today to kind of talk a little bit about my favorite tabletop experiences, my games that I like in that genre, and kind of just go from there a little bit. But before we start, let me roll a die here and see what I tell you about myself today, or whether or not we do. So let's say you get to hear about how Connor is doing on anything below a 10, anything above that. I'll go fuck myself, and we'll just immediately hop into it. Alright, I'll go fuck myself, and we'll just immediately hop into it. So, let's start with the game that I've actually been playing since like 2015, 2016, Dungeons and Dragons. I started my foray into it as a humble warlock. Particularly, I believe it was of the Fiend, and this was back before I even knew what the hell anything was, which was pretty funny because it was a tiefling, I'm pretty sure. This was Horde of the Dragon Queen, if I remember correctly, which is like, if we're talking Dungeons and Dragons books, like out of all the 5e books, it's one of the most milquetoast options. It's your beginner starter adventure. It's old Steve from accounting is telling you to go after the angry dragon that is doing roundabouts in the town, and you gotta stop the cult of Tiamat from doing the funny, and it's like, it's not bad, but, it could be better. But that was my first experience. There was a lot of dragon stealing. If I remember correctly, there's a segment where you walk in and there is a black dragon's den that has like 6 eggs in it. And my first instinct was, I want me a pet dragon. And then it turns out I actually cooked it and turned it into an omelet. I think my character was chaotic evil after that. I can't remember for the life of me what the hell I was, but the DM was alright. It was an okay experience, but that kind of got me hooked a little bit. So then, after that, I got into, what was it? Oh man, it's on the tip of my tongue. It was Curse of Strahd. That was my second ever module I ever played. Now, I love Curse of Strahd. I think it's the best book they've ever come out with. That's like a very common opinion, but it's a realm of dread. It's a classic, like, vampire is an actual threat. There's no, oh, this is an issue or that. Nah, it's just a guy called Strahd. He's a bit of a dick. He simped for his brother's wife and then killed his brother and then tried to get his wife. His wife ended up doing a swan dive off of the deep section of the castle. But what's funny is it's like mostly a human-dominated campaign. I think there's like a couple of other races lying around for players to, like, interact with, but I tell you, it was definitely an experience when we had a Gith Yankee and a Gith Sarai, which, for those who don't know, are like, I don't know, sunburnt frog-looking people? something 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 mind flayers enslaved us when Dwergar supremacy, that's where we're at personally. Dwergar is one of my favorite races, although yeah, it was pretty goofy. Oh my god, I'm going all over the place, but that was my second ever campaign. There's a segment where something I really like about it is if you die in Strahd, there is a ability to come back uh in exchange for some part of your character changing. Now, my uncle, he ended up getting clapped and he was blind, but he came back with about 30 feet of true sight. So true sight is you could put me in smoke, you could put me in this or that. I see everything in a 360-degree cone, like sphere around me within 30 feet. That entire area, so you can't really get jumped or see too much. In my case, I got clapped, I think by a vampire spawn. She dropped down on the ceiling and absolutely proceeded to body me inside out. And I came back as a zombie. Resistance to cold damage, but vulnerability to fire, which wasn't fun. But there's a lot of necrotic and cold in that. But I think it's a very fun campaign. It's very like gothic and grimdark. And I'm a big fan of that, as we've established. Oh yeah. But like Dungeons and Dragons as a whole is probably my go-to system. There's a reason why it's like considered baby's first TTRPGs, because it's just it if you crave the mechanics of something that goes a little deeper, because I think Dungeons and Dragons does a great job setting up stuff, but like if you're trying to go a step deeper, it's a little difficult to kind of get into it. Pathfinder, for instance, I know people like to flock to, because the thing about Pathfinder is it's more structured and there's a lot more rules and stuff you can do for gameplay wise, which in feats, especially in Dungeons and Dragons, could be like mostly combat oriented. When I know people like their role playing opportunities, and I know Pathfinder has a very wide and varied variety of that. I can't remember what it was called, but there was a feat that pretty much says I'm really good at pretending to be a noble. Now, I think that anything could really work, and I've particularly in my many years of DMing, I've always either kit bashed the system to work. Like I remember running a Warhammer campaign. Although we'll get to that. I think overall Dungeons and Dragons is like just my go-to fun system that I genuinely enjoy running. Although it's been really difficult to get a player base now. It is tabletop, but it's not throwing dice, I guess. But Pen and Dragon RPG level thing. It's more Warhammer. I've always been a big fan of wargaming. I know that my uncle got me into it at a relatively young age, and ever since then I've been Blood Angel fan #1. Especially with the new detachment that came out not too long ago with the whole get battle shocked and get extra attacks. I don't know about you, but my blob of Death Company just looks 10 times more delicious when I can send you into the meat grinder of 30 people and just watch the bodies stack as I roll like 800 dice. I just love rolling dice, man. There's nothing more satisfying than having 100 dice to roll because you charged in with an Orc Boys unit. That, or you're just doing it just to do it. But, I've always liked painting models especially and putting them together, and that's a fun system. But there's a system that I highly recommend people checking out. So I don't know how many people know this. I think I might talk about it briefly, but a setting that I am a big fan of in the Games Workshop IP is Age of Sigmar, which I know gets a bad rap from people because it was built off of the ashes of Warhammer Fantasy as like the reboot system. Although technically now we have Old World, so. But nah, I like it because it's batshit insane high fantasy, like godly beings duking it out for the sanctity of the realm. It's not as grounded in reality as fantasy was, because like in fantasy, I suppose, there was like a very concrete level of setting with you're an Uber Striker, there's the Empire, there's the New World, the Old World, etc. In Age of Sigmar, battlefields are, here is the location of this big-ass realm that we're in, and everyone's just gonna fight over there. There are some set pieces, but I know people prefer fantasy for that reason. But the setting in question is Soulbound. Now, what I really like about Soulbound, aside from the dice system, is it very much encourages you to think about your background and your race and how that influences you. So, bit of lore context. Soulbound are the champions of the Grand Alliance Order from various factions, who, for one reason or another, leave their respective home and faction to answer the call of Sigmar and be forged as a Soulbound. Soulbound are the chosen champions of Order that enact the will of Sigmar across the realms. And these could be people who have no interaction whatsoever, because it's more of like a common goal thing. So you'll have a witch elf, or like a hag from the Daughters of Cain, who go about, their method one way, but then they're now directly butting heads with a Doomseeker from the Fire Slayers, which I think is just really cool because, your souls are linked together. You do not, under any circumstances, get to just be like, all right, I'm off doing my own thing. Nah, like, that person's longevity is tied to yours, and there's a shared resource system to improve rules. There's a system to kind of like encourage really fun roleplay opportunities. I think my favorite one was having a player who was from the what's their face? Oh my god, I'm blanking out right now. The Sylvaneth, which are, if you're familiar with the old setting fantasy, they were like the dryads, the wood elves, pretty much, but these are more of the tree spirits being given form. And they have never, this tree spirit in question that the player was playing, has never wandered out of a forest before. And he was paired with another individual from like the opposite end of the spectrum as far as goals are concerned from the Daughters of Cain. A very, very funny hag queen. One who left her coven because Morathi Kane, who's the like leader of that faction, was a little sus of her allegiances to her. And the thing about, soulbound individuals again is that they pretty much forego all previous allegiances unless you're playing a Stormcast, but we'll get to that. Now, there are obvious benefits to picking certain races. Like if you want to be guns, you pick a Gehenadron Overlord, which are the Dowie or the dwarves that have all the big guns. But there is a like completely separate race, which are the personal chosen of Sigmar, the Stormcast, who are kind of like pretty much the babysitters, I guess, to kind of like help you along the way. And it's really funny because the thing about Soulbound is the Stormcast, I should say, is like they can't die in the traditional sense because as long as their soul makes it back to Azir, they have the capability to just get reforged and come back, which I think is really goofy because every single time they come back, a part of them gets left behind. So, over the course of a year, this campaign I had, there was a player who was playing a Stormcast, but they just, on top of rolling like shit half the time, and we'll cover the dice system, they, for the life of them, could not keep their head up. Like, I remember one minute they got killed by a Maw Crusher, the next, a Cruel Boy put a bolt right in between their eyes and they exploded and they ran off. But rules as written, they come back at a later point once they are reforged. However, it kind of added a bit of flavor to the system. Every time they came back, I had them roll the dice, and if they got a certain amount, they would keep forgetting more and more. And it got to a point where they were more of an automaton doing what they were told as opposed to the original character that the player came up with. And it was really, from a role-playing perspective, it's like seeing somebody with memory loss they know you're important, but they can't remember you to save their life. Although I was also one of those people who was very into, I think it was old Skaven Warhammer Fantasy lore with the, hold on, let me look it up here. Cult of the Yellow Fang. Yeah, Cult of the Yellow Fang, which was the Skaven creator who the Chaos Cult owed their allegiance to. But yeah, no, it was funny seeing a Gracer who was actually a human. Something that I want to talk about a little bit now is the dice system. So unlike other RPGs, tabletop RPGs, where you have like your D20s, your D10s, your D4s, your D6s, your D8s, D12s, all of that. The thing in Soulbound is you have it's a D6 system. Now, the way it works is you have a set of dice in your pool that you just get outright for like stats. So let's say I'm like a very strong boy. Well, that'll give me like 2 dice, 2d6. But I'm very proficient at being a swole boy, so that's like another 3d6. So that puts me up to about 5d6 worth of dice in this pool. Now you might be asking yourself, like, well, what's the point of this? Well, the reason is there is so difficulty checks are like checks in general in Soulbound. The way it works is you have like the difficulty and then the amount of times you need to get that number in order to pass. So if the difficulty check was a 6 on the die, you would need to get that backed up by the amount of times you would need to get that exact number. So if it's like, it's a 3-6 roll, you need to get 6 3 times out of your dice pool of 5. And for reference, that's like really high end on the difficulty spectrum. Usually it's like 1 or 2 dice you would roll backed up by the difficulty being more like 3 that you would need to get, which is a lot easier to do, but the book incentivizes that if you do make a really difficult check, it's like a legendary thing that spreads across the world. Now, the other thing I like about the setting, or just the system, is it really plays into the idea that you are like legendary. You are heroes in the making. A band of misfits that gets turned into a legendary form of individuals that will blaze across the realms and put an end to whatever is happening. So there is a system called the Doomsday Counter, and it doesn't end the campaign, but as it gets higher and higher, it will eventually reach a point where enemies will start getting stronger, the world will get darker, areas will be more difficult, people are more aversive to them because they failed in their duty. But if you keep it low, you do missions, you complete objectives, you don't sit on your ass, it will get better and better and better, and you'll get bonuses for that as well. And I really like that because it encourages players to, actually pull the part and do the campaign. A good example was players were intercepting a ritual that was going on to protect it against a bunch of Skaven that were trying to disrupt it. And these were not low-profile souls that were going into the afterlife. These were individuals who, if they were to fall into Nagash's grasp, I think I said it like after the Necroquake Wars, which was like after the realms got absolutely bombasted by the big fart of Nagash. Well, the players managed to protect some of the priests, but 1 or 2 of them got caught in the crossfire. I rolled, and then some of the souls got eaten up by Nagash, and that moved the counter to the right, which is bad. But the players went on a side objective into the underworld through one of their gods. I think it was the Sigmar priest who opened a portal, and they all went down there and solved the issue, which brought it back down by 1. But that interaction gave players a sense of legitimacy when it comes to solving issues and finding ways of cooperating with each other. I think a really funny, I think the best way to look at it is the Lord of the Rings scene where the dwarf is like, didn't think I'd die fighting with an elf, and the elf's like, yeah, how about friend? I don't remember the exact characters' names, nor do I remember the exact line, but it was something to that effect. But I think that lends it's a nice emphasis And like Age of Sigmar in of itself, that setting has so many things you could fight. There's undead, there's demons, there's other order factions that might be pioneering to go against you. Uh, there's good old fashioned undead that are like all over the place. And they also came out with books that play for chaos as well, and destruction and undead. And they have different mechanics because Soulbound is built around the idea that you are using the shared pool, but Undead is more like you're just champions of the Undead God Nagash going around doing his will. Chaos is very straightforward, and I haven't actually checked out Destruction, even though I probably should, because I know that there are so many fun things on that section. But it's definitely a rich setting that I think people would be able to appreciate, especially the book. And it's very straightforward to DM as well, in my own experience. No, no problem as far as that's concerned, but it can definitely be a little difficult for some people if they don't keep their head on a swivel and pay attention. Yeah, no, Champions of Death, Champions of Order, which is like the expansion book, and then there's just this one, which is Champions of, I believe, Chaos. Actually, let me double check how many books Cubicle 7 even has. Right, they also did the original Warhammer Fantasy, Player's Guide, Wrath and Glory, which is the 40k one. I think Imperial Maledictum is more you're playing individuals who are based out of a situation of, this is my patron, we're going to go do things. I could talk at length about this, but I think it would be wise if we jump ship over to a different system. Now, another system that I'm actually kind of fond of was, well, I think it had good, it was a fun interaction, but I think it could be kind of complicated, was Dark Heresy, or Rogue Trader. Personally, not the biggest fan of D100 systems. I think they're overcomplicated, and I've never really been a fan of using percentile dice to determine the most basic of things. But having a fun system in which you are a dude who, be it a space marine, be it a rogue trader, or another thing, there was a lot of fun stuff with that. I don't remember it too well, I just wanted to talk about it a little bit. But yeah, no, I think the biggest thing, and now I want to like talk a little bit, kind of like experiences as a DM and as a player. There is, I feel if like you're playing for the first time, that fear of role playing, because innately when you play a tabletop game, or like a tabletop RPG, you have to, the best thing to do is you need to role play that character to the best of your ability. Like I remember my DM back when I went to the hobby store for Horde of the Dragon Queen was very insistent on forcing me to actively speak out the lines and kind of keep a consistent character, because I know alignment doesn't matter as much in 5e and it's more of just a label nowadays, but he definitely preferred that the character, if they were evil, they had agendas that matched that so we could weave it into the story. If they were a lawful good paladin, they obeyed the tenets of their oath. Otherwise, he was one of the rare few that actually called people out when they didn't do that. An oath is not a suggestion; it is a solemn vow that allows you to have power. But then there's Oathbreaker in Baldur's Gate 3, who happens every 2 seconds because I attack somebody even though they attack me first. But I think that when push comes to shove, you aren't going to, I think, truly enjoy your character until you roleplay them and really get into the backstory, especially. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum, there's the DM, and God bless our DMs out there. Seriously, give your DM a hug. They're the whole thing that keeps the world turning, but the story cannot continue unless you have players that abide by that. And I know Forever DM is a massive syndrome. Like, pretty much my 4 years I spent at college, I was the DM for it. I've had scarce few moments where I was actually allowed to play in a campaign. And the biggest thing that sucked is consistent DMs are so rare to find, I feel. Which is why once you're locked into that role of being the guy who rolls the dice and sets the story, it kind of just sucks for a time being if that's the only thing you do. Because, sometimes people, they just want to take a step back and kind of play in a campaign, but I know first-time DMs as well, they're privy to not necessarily knowing when to put their foot down. Particular instances like homebrew classes or DMs taking advantage, no, players, excuse me, taking advantage of it, which isn't too great either. But I would say if you have a DM and they've been DMing for a couple of years and they're looking for a way out, take the time to look at a module. Even like the pre-made books are perfect because they have everything you're going to need. You just have to actually role play the character, and if you're comfortable with that, you can move on a little bit. Man, I think I still it's funny because I remember my wizard got clapped, and the store that I was at when I was playing, they have pre-made characters that you can just have, but I think I still got that sheet somewhere around here. Somewhere. But yeah, that's kind of really just my thoughts on the whole situation. In my personal experiences, at the end of the day, I always love rolling dice, and I think that being able to do that with folks kind of helps break up the monotony, especially when, COVID hit. Oh yeah, speaking of which, I remember when my frickin' what's its face? The funny, oh my god. When my college closed down, I ended up DMing double a week, and I was still kind of getting down into it, but once I got it, it was very straightforward. Man, it's fun though, but it's hard. It's very hard. But I think we can take a moment here to answer a question or two. I only picked out one. I didn't really. I wanted to save them for a more rainy day down the street. But, all right, let's see here. Oh, this is actually not a bad one. Hello, Connor, long-time listener. Ever since you started back at the Berkshire Talking Chronicle. Oh, damn, that was last year, effectively. Holy shit. Well, thank you for that long. Do you have any intention of playing Ultra Kill? So the funny thing about that is I do actually have it in my library. I'm just not currently playing it due to disinterest. It's not a bad game whatsoever, and I know there are many people who swear by it, but it's just not really on the priority. But hey, thank you all for listening. This is Connor Talks Games, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.